Again, for those of you who do not know, Justice and Beyond has been organizing now for, hold on, organizing now for many years, nearly a decade that we've been fighting for people. And in this latest season, our iteration of Justice and Beyond, we have been making sure that we focus on certain major areas, and those are the environment, fighting for environmental justice as we come alongside and stand in solidarity with people, especially in the river parishes and all over Louisiana, as we fight against climate change and seek to mitigate it. That we also fight for youth justice and for criminal justice issues and reform specifically, that we fight in the area of education, ensuring that especially our Black students are given quality education, and making sure that we raise the alarm that the charter school system is a failed experiment. Also, too, finally, that we fight in the area of housing justice as well, too, believing that people deserve safe, affordable housing. So with that said, listen, our governing model is that we have a pillar system. That means that organizations and people have signed up to be a part of the visioning and planning for Justice and Beyond. If you have time and if you're willing, we'd love to have you as a pillar. That means just put in the box that you want to be a pillar of Justice and Beyond. Show up at our meetings on Tuesdays at noon that lasts until about 1:30. Add your input. Know that your voice is valuable, and we'll be sure to make sure that we just put you to work, because we need you as we advocate and amplify the voices of brown and Black people in the state of Louisiana, and in New Orleans and all over the state of Louisiana, I'll say. And so also, finally, we are so happy that you're here. We're meeting by way of Zoom until we come back together in person one day, and that will happen. So as we begin, let me just introduce to you the topic for tonight is the Water Collaborative and the work of the Water Collaborative, in that there is something coming down the pipe that we all need to be aware of, that we all need to be educated on. And so tonight is that opportunity to be able to do that. And I'm sure that this will go to other people that have not heard and that they can learn as well too. So I want to introduce you to you, Jessica Dandridge, who is the executive director of the Water Collaborative. And just want to ask you, Jessica, well, first of all, welcome. And everybody, again, in case I didn't introduce myself, it's Pastor Gregory T. Manning. I am one of the co-moderators for Justice and Beyond. So again, Pastor Gregory T. Manning or Reverend Manning, either one's fine. We are so happy to have you tonight, Jessica. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here and for educating us all on this important work that you all are doing for the state of Louisiana, for the city of New Orleans. So, Jessica, welcome.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I had a little Zoom problems last week. So wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Dandridge. I'm the executive director of the Water Collaborative. I also have a colleague on the call. Holly, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Laviolette, and I'm the research coordinator at the Water Collaborative.
Yes. Well, I appreciate y'all having me here. I see a few familiar names, so I'm really excited. And thank you again, Reverend Manning, for introducing us. Before I get started in the presentation, a little bit about myself, and then I think why we were invited to come. Born and raised here in New Orleans. I grew up in the 7th Ward, also Gentilly area, but I lived all over the city in various neighborhoods, and I've worked in the nonprofit space most of my life. I started my journey after Hurricane Katrina when I turned 16, and I worked for an organization called the Fire Youth Squad. I worked for Rethink, I worked with VELA, I worked for a lot of different youth organizations over the years, and studied at Xavier in political science and sociology, and also lived in New York and went to school there and learned international security with the hopes of bringing back my knowledge that I've learned in New York back to New Orleans. And so that's kind of part of my journey. I feel like I have a lot of different aspects of that. And so, yeah, I'm just really excited to be here. Holly, maybe you can just tell me a little bit about your background as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. As I stated, my name is Holly Laviolette. I'm the research coordinator at the Water Collaborative. For a long time, I really didn't know where I wanted to go career-wise. I felt like I knew I wanted to help people for sure, but didn't know in what capacity I was going to be able to do that. And so I always felt like healthcare was the way that I was going to go. But the thought of literally having someone's life in my hands kind of freaked me out. And so I started doing research, and I had a background in biology. And so a friend of mine told me to look into public health. So the more I did the research, I chose to start studying public health. And my intention was actually to go into occupational health. But the longer that I was in the program, I really, really started to enjoy the environmental side. And so while I was finishing up my degree, I interned at the Water Collaborative as part of our water quality testing project in Cancer Alley. And after the project was finished, they offered me a position full time, and I gladly accepted. I love what the Water Collaborative does, and I really, really loved the nonprofit because I loved that we did everything. We were there from start to finish. So we did the research. We actually went out and physically did the collecting of the water. And then we went to the community and presented our findings and really educated them about what it was what we were testing for and why we were doing it. And so, yeah, that's why I chose to stay with the Water Collaborative. And Jessica is so knowledgeable and so smart. And so I'm learning so much under her and our policy director, Rebecca. So I'm definitely in the right hands.
Well, thank you, Holly. You always give me a compliment. But I want to give her a compliment because she's been an excellent colleague and really keystone to this project. And so what is this project? Also, let me back up. She was talking about our PFAS report, which we can also talk about a little bit if we have questions about water quality, if we have time. I feel like what we're talking about today will probably take up a bulk of the conversation. So to kind of give people a little bit of background on why we were invited to really talk about a project that we're working on called the Water Justice Fund, which is essentially a stormwater fee for New Orleans. And to just give you a little bit of background on how we got here, the Water Collaborative back in 2016, along with other institutions such as BGR, even NOLA.com, had cited that the way we fund our drainage system is inequitable. And it doesn't actually work and meet the needs that we need them to meet. Not to mention the entire burden of the drainage system. When I say drainage, I mean our pipes, our catch basins, our pumping system, everything that manages to produce flooding actually is underfunded and poorly managed, as we all know. But a lot of that has to do with the institutions and the systems in place, not necessarily in any particular individual. So my organization has been working on stormwater work for a very long time. It started in 2013, the Water Collaborative, as I like to say, an unlikely crew of people who are interested in the water work of New Orleans. So that included engineers and architects, climate activists, neighborhood associations, and so on. And I became the executive director in 2019. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking because I know some of this is going to be in the presentation. But again, we're here to talk about the Water Justice Fund, get you guys feedback on that. And then kind of give you an idea of what you should be looking forward to or not looking forward to. So I'm saying that because this whole process is an open process, and we have been moving and shifting just like the river when people give us feedback and where we can learn something. So I am going to stop there and share my screen. I also want to say since I'm going to be sharing my screen, I probably won't be able to see all of you. So I don't know if there's a process for this, Reverend Manning, but if you just want to unmute yourself, in case I can't see the chat, that would be helpful.
All right, very good. Valerie will chime in there too if there's questions during the chat, and most often we just wait till you're done with your presentation unless you want to take questions during.
Okay, great. And also, can I have access to share my screen? Hi, Valerie. All right, thank you. All right, so I talked about who we are a little bit, but why we're here is the stormwater fee for climate resilience, equity, and transparency. So I'm gonna just jump on in, see if it's frozen, there we go. So what is our mission? Our mission is to build a diverse network for all who are impacted by flood risks and focuses on equitable practices to sustainably live and thrive with water. The ways in which we do that we have three kind of pillars for that. One is education advocacy. We work on ensuring residents really understand how water systems work We're more on a systems level organization, right? So we're constantly asking people who is making the decisions, how are they making the decisions, and how residents can impact those decisions. With that being said, we also advocate for residents to have a larger voice in the changes that they see in their community, mainly again pertaining to infrastructure around water. The other one is a big chunk of what we do is policy work. We do policy at all levels of government. One of the one we're talking about today is local policy, but we also work on state policy. We have an active roster of legislation that we are advocating for and supported on in the development on. And then finally, we do a lot of work at the federal side, which I won't get into because it's a lot, but we sit on over 10 federal coalitions advising people on water management, climate adaptation mitigation, and resilience. I also should say I'm also on the Governor's Commission for the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority. And lastly is equity, right? And when I've learned about that word my entire life, so I'm sure everybody's heard the word equity a million times, but equity for us is about getting residents deeply entrenched in this work to build resources and build coalitions. So residents can not only have a seat at the table, but they can actually create and make the table. And that's what we really focus on as well. So we're an umbrella organization, which means we are member-based. We have members from all over, again, the sector, from local to national, and that's how we exchange our resources, right? So we don't do everything in-house. Every single program we have, I want you guys to know this, is collaborative in its nature. So we have a partner on every single project. And that's one of my tenets as the ED is that I don't do anything alone. I don't do anything without communicating with the people I'm trying to serve. And I don't do anything without supporting a community in mind. So that's just something to keep in mind about what we do. This is a little bit of who we work with. Again, this is like a snapshot. And so I will just, put that up there for you guys to see. There's a lot of local partners, but again, a lot of national partners as well. We've been doing advocacy work for a long time, as I mentioned. I'm not going to get deep into it, but we did actually, my organization helped to create the current stormwater code. And we've been advising on the update to the stormwater code, which I can talk a little bit about. We piloted and installed the first ever permeable parking lot in New Orleans. We actually petitioned and moved Sewage and Water Board to enact a water shutoff moratorium, which was a really big thing. We also supported them on their first ever water affordability program pilot, and we're currently supporting them on their current affordability program pilot that they're working on. We work with the Louisiana Watershed Initiative. I'm the chair of Region 8. As I mentioned, I'm on the Governor's Commission. And we have had a lot of other wins since then. We also, again, tested for PFAS, forever chemicals in the Mississippi River, and had a lot of huge support for what we did in the Mississippi River. So with that being said, let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. This is where I like to nerd out, and this is part of my love. I love this work. I've worked, I heard Reverend Manning talk about schools. I worked in the school system with incarcerated and at-risk youth for a long time, and I love that, but this is really near and dear to my heart. I feel like this is something that is important to New Orleans, and honestly, without a big shift in the way we do our systems, we could not exist as is the way we are currently existing, right? Whether it's education or justice or civil rights, all of that won't matter to transportation, housing if we're underwater. And that's really my big concern right now. This photo right here, just for people to know, the last time we had a massive systems change in New Orleans when it comes to water was in the flood of 1927, right? And that was when the Army Corps of Engineers was created after the Great Flood, and it really changed how the river moved and swayed. And that has caused a lot of other problems that the state is trying to rectify now. But that because of the walling of the Mississippi River, right? The one pro is that we can live in places that we never could live in before. Same thing with the expansion of the drainage system, but that always comes with a lot of challenges. One of those challenges is really that the way, I'm gonna back up a little bit before I get into like what a stormwater fee is. A stormwater fee, the reason why we're talking about it again is because the system is inequitable. So for me to start off, currently the drainage system is funded by a millage, right? So anybody who has pays property tax in the city, you probably already know that. Millages are based off of the value of your home, your neighborhood. There's all of these equations that go into that. Currently though, because our drainage system is paid for by millage, that means that people who don't pay property taxes, usually nonprofits, but also different types of businesses, state-owned properties, they don't pay anything towards drainage at all. And so what that has resulted in is close to 60% of the city not paying anything into our drainage system as a whole. Currently, we have a 16.23 millage on the books, which is not even covering the entire need of our drainage system, right? So that's all of the pumping systems, the men and women who work the pumping systems, right? Operations and maintenance, but also capital projects. That also includes catch basins, pipes 36 inches and up or under. There's a lot of drainage infrastructure in New Orleans. And to be frank, we have one of the most expensive systems in the country and arguably the world. Our pumping stations, while they are important to our livelihood, they're very expensive to maintain. But with that being said, they have also caused a lot of problems, which I talked about. Mainly, they not only beyond its inequitable funding system, it's not actually meeting the needs of New Orleans, right? So we have paved over a lot of our green spaces. We have seen a lot of subsidence where we're sinking. A lot of people are aware of that. And with climate change, rain events are getting harder and stronger. Since 2013, and even before the Water Club existed, there have been people advocating for green infrastructure and stormwater management best practices that are different from great infrastructure models seen as you see here in the Bywater with a big levee system, right? We're talking about green infrastructure, we're talking about bioswales, we're talking about rain gardens, we're talking about all kinds of amazing tools, right? Some that are small scale to large scale that we need to be focusing on. Currently, the millage, though, that everybody's paying for does not go towards that at all. It just goes towards operations and maintenance for sewage and water boards, again, pumping system. The other thing I want to note is people hate their water bills, right? And I get it, I hate the water bill as well. But that water bill does not cover drainage. That water bill covers your drinking water quality and your sewerage, right? And then you also have the trash fee on there, but it actually does not cover anything to do with drainage, which is a huge misconception that people in New Orleans have. So there's a big gap in funding. And one of the ways the Water Collaborative has been looking into to addressing this gap in funding is by creating a new type of revenue, right? One that is generated equitably. This is the really big important part. The way we are generating funding for drainage right now is not only inequitable, but it's impractical. It's not working, and it hasn't worked for close to 100 years. So instead of us paying for our drainage system through our property taxes, we're actually trying to shift it to where we're paying a fee, right? So it's not a tax, it's a flat rate that any a business or a homeowner or vice versa, there's different ways it could look like. There are over 33 stormwater fees across the nation, right? So we are really behind on the ball considering how much water we have. And we probably won't be the first to have a stormwater fee though in New Orleans. Baton Rouge is also implementing one right now as we speak. But for those who are curious about what a stormwater fee is and its basic understanding, right, because it looks different depending on the city you live in, is that it generates revenue based on the size of your impervious surfaces on your property, which means based on the size of your business or the size of a school or the size of a church or the size of a stadium, that's how much pressure you're putting on the drainage system. So based on the pressure you're putting on the system, that's how much a business or again, a nonprofit or again, a state-run agency could pay. There's also a caveat here, which is community members, right? So residents could or could not pay, and it's usually a flat rate, which I'll talk to you again about what that policy is gonna look like because we're actually developing it right now with a workshop series. But that's just a general idea. That doesn't mean that's what New Orleans is going to do. That's just how it normally works. And why the impervious surface matters is it's a runoff factor, which calculates the property's runoff using data on soil, slope, stormwater models, and other models. All these models already exist. There's multiple agencies that have that, including New Orleans, Sewage and Water Board, Regional Planning Commission, you go on. And so the reason why, again, I'm gonna keep reiterating 60% of the city is not paying towards drainage. All of the weight of cost of drainage is on residents. So we have to really change the way we do it. But this is bigger than just money, right? We're looking at systems change. We're looking at changing excuse me, the way New Orleans has constantly done or managed our water system, which has been completely inequitable and ineffective. So one thing we're looking at is undoing the built environments that promote collective trauma and equity. One of the things that was really important to me is that realizing the amount of green spaces Black communities don't have in New Orleans and changing that model. Currently, there is a small parks millage, but it's for activities, right? It's not for building parks. There's a park millage that's for sharing revenue across 5 different systems, right? Audubon, City Park, Nord, as well as Nora and other parks, right? But those are about programming. It's not about creation of new parks and undoing, systems like racial systems that prevented Black people from having green spaces. The other thing is creating more equitable health outcomes, right? So studies have already shown that when Black people or brown people, low-income vulnerable communities have more access to green spaces, there is an increase in health. And I should also note a decrease in crime. And there's multiple studies that have talked about that. The other thing that I'm really excited about is embedding transparency and accountability, as well as community voice into this future infrastructure project. Every single infrastructure millage or project before the last 5 years, honestly, was top down, right? City council, the mayor, everyone telling us how infrastructure should work. And I really think that is a completely inequitable way to approach this, right? Infrastructure impacts us every single day. Every aspect of our lives is impacted by roads and streets and signs and parks and flooding and heat island effects. So why shouldn't we have a say in our infrastructure? So throughout this process, we have had community voice leading us. Again, like I said, we are meandering just like the Mississippi River, and we're changing our process when we get feedback and when we see the need for change. But more so, the goal is whenever the stormwater fee is passed, is to have something that's built in transparency. And again, the big one is accountability. The system doesn't have accountability measures built into it. It is made that way. Sewage and Water Board was made in 1899. And so they don't have the type of accountability measures that we're looking for. And until we as the community members enact a type of policy to create that change, they're not going to do that on their own. I also will note that the City Council has tried multiple occasions to adjust and change the way Sewage and Water Board and DPW operates. But honestly, they can't do that with the current system that exists. Until we have a new system, the way it's currently done is not going to improve. And again, improve our long-term quality of life and sustainability. I will be frank in that the climate change studies are not good for New Orleans. At best, we have 20 years before we see massive changes, which could be continual flooding. That could mean the failure of our levee systems on a much larger scale. Not to mention, there are changes at the federal level. Joe Biden and other administrations are talking about defunding the National Flood Insurance Program, right? Many of you have already seen your insurance go up. And the Biden administration has already said that it is up to cities, parishes, states to figure out a way to reduce their own cost for flood insurance and flood management. And they're really wanting to push green infrastructure and other climate adaptation measures as a way to do that. So FEMA and other people already looking at green infrastructure as a way to reduce costs. There isn't an official a way to document that yet, but they're already looking at it. So we need to be ahead of the curve, not behind the curve. But also, we don't have enough time to figure it out and wait till somebody makes this change. We have to make the change ourselves. And so let's say this fee is passed, right? And what does it actually do, right? Okay, so you're saying to me that it's inequitable. You're saying that the way we're doing it is not right. We don't have accountability and transparency. Sure, but what is the money for? Again, this is where the accountability part comes in. We're looking at creating a fund. That's why it's called the Water Justice Fund, right? That's what we're calling it. It's because it's not just about more money for Sewage and Water Board. In fact, we as the workshop attendees are going to decide together where that money should go. So it doesn't necessarily have to go to Sewage and Water Board. It doesn't necessarily have to go to DPW. It could go to a completely different stormwater utility. We can create this system ourselves. But the goal is for all the funds to go into a large pool to do a few different things, potentially. Again, we're creating this together right now. So it could go to pocket parks and community scale green infrastructure. It could go to nonprofit partnerships for services, particularly around maintenance and development and implementation. Workforce development is a huge one that a lot of people are interested in. There's already a bunch of green infrastructure workforce programs that exist. Thrive New Orleans, we have Louisiana Green Corps, we have Groundworks, there is Urban Scapes. There's a bunch of different programs that already exist. So how do we get more young people into these really great high-paying jobs that are better for their community and better for the environment? Also, community adaptation programs. So the NORA office has a program that already exists where homeowners in Gentilly only currently can get up to $25,000 to retrofit their homes. This is mainly for low income and elderly individuals. They're hoping to expand this program citywide instead of just Gentilly. So this is another great opportunity for that. The other opportunities is green debt financing, which is basically using the debt that we collect from the stormwater fee to help increase our bonds so we can get more capital projects. That's a huge problem that the city has had for many years, right? We just recently got a good credit rating under Mayor Cantrell, but for years we didn't have even a good enough credit rating to get new capital projects. That's been a massive problem. So until the city can really start financing it, again, this is what Joe Biden is talking about. Until we can start financing our own work, we are not going to see a whole lot of change. And lastly, is clean energy investments. One thing we really want to also see is how we are powering the system. Most people don't realize, but the pumps for work, they're on every day, right? There's 24 dry weather pumps. And then of course, there's the pumps that turn on when it rains. That's expensive. And we're paying Entergy a premium to run this. Now they are building a new substation at the Carrollton Water Plant, which should reduce costs a little bit. But until, again, we really directly start talking about the issues with energy, how we're powering the system and the cost, we're never really going to see the cost of drainage or even our water and sewage systems decrease until we really address the elephant in the room, which is energy. I talked a lot about the benefits, so I'm not really going to get deep into it, but there are so many more benefits than there are cons to this type of system. Every city that's done a stormwater fee has seen immense improvements in their overall community, from not only funding great infrastructure improvements, but also green infrastructure, reducing flooding is obvious, reducing our carbon footprint. I should also say reducing our heat island effects, funding for green infrastructure maintenance and other maintenance, beautification. There's a bunch of indirect benefits, right? Revitalization and incentives for green infrastructure, which again expands that workforce, expands this new market. And creating a new system that's with trust and transparency built in by residents. That's the most important thing I want people to take away from this. So this is a multi-pronged process, which I've mentioned. We have lots of different groups. Actually, this presentation is a little dated because we have more groups now. But what we have done already is convene several groups. We have a steering committee. So we're working with 3 council members who are advising us and also support what we're doing. We're also working with GNO Inc. We're working with NOLA BA. Obviously, the Greater New Orleans Foundation is a part of this as well, and they're helping guide us in this process. That's a smaller group of 11 people who are really helping us get to the finish line, right? So we're building this, but how can we make sure we win here? The other one is a public advisory group, where we have over 65 members in this group of people who are water experts, community leaders, neighborhood activists who are just really interested in this work, and has again been advising us for almost 2 years now. I can't believe time has flown by this fast. We have a CEC group, which is basically our workshops. We're holding a 10-part workshop series right now, where residents from all different walks of life, all different parts of the community will learn about drainage, how it works in the systems, and then help us decide what the stormwater fee should look like for New Orleans. This is a big part of this process. And without the workshops and the attendees and the community engagement committee, we would not be able to do this. And then lastly is Water Now Alliance. They are a think tank based out of San Francisco who's been helping us, but also has helped other agencies in New Orleans around drainage for many years. They are a nonprofit, and all they do is research. So they've given us a lot of data on this. The other thing we're going to do is develop a toolkit and policy recommendations at the end of the workshop series process. So we're literally going to give the council and the mayor's office a toolkit of saying, this is what we want to see in terms of policy. And also, this is how you get there, right? We have too often complained to council. We've often gotten frustrated with the mayor, but we don't give them an actual like ABC that often. Not to say it never happens, it doesn't happen a lot. And when it comes to water, it never happens, right? We usually see sewage and water board make an accusation and then say this is what we're going to do. The council says yay or nay, and then that's the end of the conversation. And everybody goes home angry with their water bill. We're trying to take this a different approach and really, again, bringing this directly to the council. And then lastly, we want to see this hopefully pass through an ordinance with the city council, using hopefully with a groundswell of support anchored by a lot of the people we're talking to. Again, we have a bunch of other groups that we've engaged. Honestly, and there's so many other people I haven't even mentioned. We have salons. We've been having small town hall meetings. I would say we've already spoken directly to well over 500 people, but we're going to be ramping that up over the summer and fall, where we're going to be doing media. We're going to have canvassers. We're going to have people really, really hitting the pavement. And so we're really excited about that. As I mentioned, I'm not going to get too much into the quotes. The whole point is that collaboration is at the core of this process. And so each group has a role to play. We have a steering committee who's going to be, again, finalizing the language, again, working with the CEC group. This has changed since I want to be clear that we're listening and really trying to ensure we have community voice at every step. So the CEC group at the end of the workshops are going to be working with the steering committee to make sure that their voices are heard. And the advisory group is, again, helping us kind of create an open forum for transparency and education. All this to say, we're hoping by spring 2024 to bring this to council. That way they can pass this as an ordinance. Now, I know a lot of people keep asking, well, why is it not going to the ballot? Because there's two reasons why it's not going to the ballot. One, the state of Louisiana last year passed a bill, HB 713, which says that councils or parishes can pass their own stormwater fee. And that was, again, because Baton Rouge was already planning on doing this. New Orleans was interested in doing this. And then with the Louisiana Watershed Initiative, a lot of other cities are already considering that they want a stormwater fee because, again, the changes in how we pay for flood management on the federal scene. Additionally, this is a robust process. So we're not actually saying how most, when you go to the ballot and it says, okay, we want to have funds to improve said agency, right? Well, we're actually creating a brand new system. We're not saying, oh, we're just giving more money to Sewage and Water Board or more money to DPW or more money to Parks and Parkways. We're saying we want a systems-wide change, and this is what we want it to look like. This is what it's going to do, and this is how it's going to improve the city overall. They're going to have completely different programs. So this is a whole programmatic change. It's a new system, so it wouldn't make sense. It'd be very challenging to put on a ballot, but also it would be too over-encompassing where it's touching multiple agencies. Additionally, I want to add a little fact on there. Every millage that has passed at the city level or for infrastructure has not worked and actually increased inequity. So when people say, well, just put on a ballot, that's more equitable. In fact, it's not, because the people who created the policy are creating it for their own gain. Again, the agency that's agency A or B is creating it for themselves, but also the council and their policy directors or lawyers finagle the language so much so where it actually decreases equity and voice of residents. We, again, don't want to see that. We want to take it directly to council. This is just a little bit about our thought leaders. We have, again, this has been a collaborative process from day one. NOLA BA has been a huge supporter of what we've been doing. We belong to a coalition called Advancing Cities, which is really trying to get green infrastructure to be a major workforce player across the country and hopefully the world, so we can be more competitive. So there's a lot of work happening at the City of New Orleans Workforce Development Office, obviously the Mayor's Office, also NORA and FANO. There's a lot of agencies involved, Parks and Parkways, and then there's several nonprofit partners, including us, Thrive New Orleans, Louisiana Green Corps, and so many more that I know I'm missing, Delgado. It's a huge partnership where we're really trying to change how we look at the industry. And get young people and older people out of service industry jobs into this new growing workforce where the demand is only going to go up over the coming years. The other one is the Business Council River Region. They actually came to us. They were actually wanting to do a stormwater fee as well. the Business Council is truly, and be very frank, a lobbying group for businesses in New Orleans. But this is where people say, well, the businesses wouldn't want this. Well, actually, the businesses are the ones that brought it to me. They see a major problem. They want a systems change. If you own a business in New Orleans, I know I have a business, not only the Water Club, but I have my own business. It's scary to know that one day, for a heavy rain or maybe a hurricane, and you could lose everything, right? We all have our traumas from Katrina or even past events. And again, businesses need more security. We also just can't grow New Orleans at this rate, right? If we're looking to grow our economy, we need to see different changes. I will also say that I talked to New Orleans and Company, who's not necessarily a thought leader, but just a partner and supporter of what we're talking about. And they even mentioned that, our tourism is dropping, right? It may seem like sometimes like, oh, there's so many tourists in town. But actually, not only has the city shrunk in size, right? We're under 400,000 now post Katrina, but more so, we're seeing less and less people coming here, mainly for conferences and work events. People are going to cities that are more competitive economically. And so for us to be competitive, we have to give people the reassurance that New Orleans is a safe place to grow your business. If every time it rains and everybody has trauma and they're scared that it's going to flood, or it actually does flood, you're actually creating a system where people are more prone or more eager to leave than stay and grow their business somewhere else. I mentioned Water Now Alliance already, and then the Prevention Institute is a newer partner. They actually helped pass the LA Stormwater Fee, and they are a funder, right? And I should also I'm all about transparency. We have multiple funders for the Water Club. As I mentioned, we are a 501c3. The funders for this project include JP Morgan Chase, which is the main funder for the Advancing Cities Coalition. We also have the Prevention Institute, which gave us the largest sum, which is giving us the ability to do all the things that we're doing in this very large community-led process. And lastly, we have Pisces Foundation, which is again a water funder, and they're really trying to push a one water system across the nation, which is again building water systems around equity and justice, and basically breaking down the systems that we've had for over 100 years. The last thing I'm going to talk about here, and then I want to open it up to Q&A, is policy and toolkit workshop series. I like this little thing here. We have this a tree, right? And there's all these different aspects to that. So the roots of this is this workshop series, which we've already 5 weeks in, I think, Holly. Time flies by. So we talked about trauma-informed policymaking, we talked about Afrofuturism, systems change, and now they're in the nuts and bolts. I wasn't at the last session, but I heard it was real interesting. There's a lot of details, a lot of case studies, a lot of information. And then I'm going to look at the case studies. Again, this has changed since the last time I looked at this presentation. We are looking at Philadelphia Water as well as Baltimore Water, who are very similar cities in terms of size and demographics, as well as challenges. So those are, and again, we didn't pick these. The public advisory group helped narrow that down from 33 down to these two. So, and then the branches of this is really looking at the separate workshops of all the things that are housed inside the fee. Again, all these different agencies, what kind of system change do we want to see? And creating the fruits and nuts is actually creating a community informed process and toolkit. So like I mentioned, our strategy this year, starting May 18th, we're going to have a campaign kickoff. I'll send you guys the invitation for that after this call, where we're going to talk about all the things that we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing community listening sessions, which we've actually already started. We started those early. We're going to have a media campaign. We're going to have TV commercials, radio commercials, billboards. We want to get people's feedback, right? This whole process, we could just take this straight to council and say, well, this is what people said we want, but we really want to refine and refine and refine, right? We want this to be beneficial to as many communities as possible. So starting in May, all the way through December, we're going to have canvassers going out and doing workshops, doing listening sessions, talking about, one, educating people about how drainage works. Most people don't know how drainage works in New Orleans. And I think that's key to the problem and why we're not fixing these intrinsic issues. But two is bringing the policy that we help co-create with our workshop attendees and saying, okay, well, this is what we thought was good. What do you think about this, right? We want to have this in every aspect of that. So I will stop sharing there because I feel like there's going to be a lot of questions. And I know that a lot of times there's a lot more details in all the little aspects of that. Oh, I see Beth has joined us too. She's on our team as well. Beth, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us tonight. It's great to see some names of people that we know from the workshops and a lot of new names. So thanks for having us. So I'm Beth Caniglia. I work with Water Collaborative, and I am leading the workshop series that Jessica was mentioning. And yeah, we're 5 in, so we have 5 more left. And we hope you guys at minimum, I don't know if Jessica mentioned, but they filled up literally within the first week. But we do have a waiting list. So if you're interested in joining us, get your name on that waiting list and we'll give you a call if there's space for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, after this call, we can send a link out for that as well as the campaign kickoff. So I see there's already a question in the chat. So I'll just go ahead and jump in because I like this part. This is my favorite part, Q&A. And again, Beth can answer questions. Holly can answer questions as well. So I'm going to read out the question out loud in case people are on their phones. Lane Tripp asks, how are the federal funds divided? Is there consideration of water load, such as heavier in New Orleans, say Tucson, because we are at the bottom of the Mississippi River where it drains, and because we are much more heavily affected by rain and major storms. So federal funds for drainage, I should be clear, basically do not exist. And that's one thing when people always say, well, why isn't it, we're making all this money and it's what I don't see changes. The EPA and other agencies, but mainly the EPA sends down fundings for water, right? You have the Clean Drinking Water Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. That is for your water quality or your sewerage, right? So when sewerage and water board gets money, it's 99% of the time has to be for water quality or sewerage treatment. So for example, they got WIFIA dollars, right? And WIFIA dollars recently, I think I forgot the exact amount, but I think it might have been $13.5 billion for improving, again, their water treatment plant. And the people have been talking a lot about IJA, like they hear, Infrastructure Jobs Act, there's all these millions of dollars coming down, millions and millions. None of that money is directly for drainage, right? So you can try to do it indirectly. Like for example, the Regional Planning Commission is taking a lot of the IJA dollars and trying to build green infrastructure into transportation projects. But most of that money is for transportation. Again, the Biden administration is really pushing clean energy. So it's about, public transit, decarbonization, electric vehicles. That's really the priority, not drainage. So it's the expectation from the federal government is that we, the residents, pay for our own system. And that's pretty much what we've been doing the whole time. Also, New Orleans has a very unique challenge, right? We're a bowl. Not only are we pulling water from the Mississippi River, but we have to push water uphill and over into the Lake Pontchartrain. That's a lot of power and a lot of energy. And again, that is not a federally funded program. That is a city millage that pays for that. So in terms of where the money's going and who is carrying the burden, it's always up to the city or the community to carry the burden of their own drainage. Because yes, you're right, what they need in Tucson is very different than what we need here. And that's one of the reasons why some people have been advocating, well, the National Flood Insurance Program should just be paid for across the country. But the reality is there's some cities that will never need the federal flood insurance program, right? And I think that's a different conversation, but it's a similar problem, which is we have a unique situation, which is also, keep in mind, Jefferson Parish has a unique situation. They have coastal communities and St. Bernard has coastal communities. So I don't want to belabor the point. I don't know, Lane, if you're able to unmute if I answered your question directly or not.
No, you answered the question, but there's a kind of a corollary, and then I'm going to shut up and give other people a chance. But when you said that the legislature voted recently, like a couple of years ago, to is it each parish or each city to control their own funding and system? Was that,
Yeah.
Did I understand? Well, that to me seems like it's that, again, it seems in many ways inequitable. I just want to raise that, and then that's because, I mean, look at New Orleans. we have a very large poor population, and the same is certainly true of I don't know, river parishes. Their income levels and their tax levels must be, very, very low. So it's kind of, I wonder about that inequity, and I'll just be quiet and see if that can be addressed. Thanks.
Absolutely, Elaine. I think that's a good question. I think it's important to talk about. So the policy again is HB 713. Maybe Holly, you could drop it into the chat for those who are curious about the language on HB 713. It was unanimously passed by the state legislature, including Republicans as well as Democrats. The key point here to note is that it's for any municipality or parish, right? So basically, a parish level could do it, or council level. And again, the reason why is because the need is high, right? And so you're talking about inequity, but I want to actually give people a different perspective. The way we've been funding currently drainage is completely inequitable, and it's made to be inequitable. It has actually been inequitable for 100 years. And that's why we're in the situation we're in. So stormwater fees give communities the option of creating an equitable system, right? So as I mentioned, the way we fund drainage now, which was voted on by the public, is through millages, but those millages are inequitably distributed. Not everybody pays for it. A lot of people are left out of that millage system. So again, the most vulnerable communities are paying for that entirely, right? So your lowest income individuals, your poorest income individuals, your elderly individuals, you're already paying into drainage and it's not working. But guess who's not paying? Oshner is not paying, right? Large church systems, right? The Catholic Church, all of their properties, they're actually paying nothing towards drainage. I was actually shocked to find out, I sit on the board for New Harmony High School, and I looked at the billing and this water and drainage, $0, right? So they subsidize schools, even though schools, yes, they should have a lower cost. I know how expensive it is to run a school, I'm on a board, but the reality is that it's unfair, right? Because all the neighbors who are around a school are paying for all of drainage, where the systems that put the most stress on it are not paying anything. The other thing I'll say there, and I'll let Holly and Beth jump in if they feel comfortable to, is that the way drainage was built on systematic racism. Let's be very clear. There's a reason why Black communities are in the lower lying areas and more prone to flooding. There's a reason why there's less green space, because police officers wanted to have more surveillance in Black communities. So there's less parks and trees and green space. We are trying to undo all of that, right? With the stormwater fee. We're trying to directly address the inequities. And I would also say for communities like the river parishes, which we talk a lot to St. James and St. John leaders in those communities all the time about water, they see the benefit of it because, again, they have the same problems, right? St. James Parish's residents are suing St. James Parish because of the way they did zoning laws, right? It's the same problem in New Orleans, although the wording is very different. So I'll stop there and see if anybody has any, Beth or Holly, you feel like you need to jump in or not.
Yeah, I would just jump in, Jessica, just to reaffirm everything she said, but also one of the things that's coming out from our workshop participants is that, like other cities that currently have stormwater fees, such as Philadelphia and Baltimore, we are looking to integrate in different kinds of incentives and discounts for folks who have a hard time paying. And so discounts for people with disabilities or of a certain age group or of a certain income level, are definitely on the radar and being sketched out and brought to our attention. And so we're researching those and certainly looking at all kinds of policy tools for making this as affordable as possible. We understand that these kinds of fees can seem regressive. Like sometimes it seems like for example, Philadelphia is having a hard time with that. They are finding that they're giving a lot of their exemptions and a lot of their credits to companies, to, for-profit firms. And that's ending up over the years, putting the burden back on their residents, as opposed to, the way that it was designed to be equitable to begin with. So there are things that we need to keep an eye out for, and we're aware of those and doing all the research we can to come up with those mechanisms to make it fair.
Yeah, and I'll also add that the Philadelphia water wasn't, again, built with residents in mind. It wasn't built bottom up. We're doing it bottom up. I'll quickly answer Jeff's question and then get to you, Betty. Jeff, the infrastructure that could be built, right? Again, we are building it right now, but these are the options, right? So again, funding would go, it's called, why we're calling it a fund is that funding would go into multiple areas, right? We'd have funding going to parks and parkways. The goal is to hopefully build pocket parks, right? So in communities that don't have any green space at all or very little green space, like, Holly Grove or New Orleans East, where there's very few spaces where you can go to congregate, building those spaces to double as stormwater lots, but also maybe be a basketball court or a community reading space or a community garden. Again, I talked to the city about just floating that and they love that idea, right? And I think it's doable. The other thing, again, is expanding the green infrastructure workforce. Beth mentioned incentives and exemptions. This is going down a rabbit hole just a little bit. But when you have a stormwater fee, there are usually incentives, right? So which is like to say, if you build green infrastructure, your taxes could be reduced or your fees could be reduced. The other one is being exempt, right? And I think this is a big question. So again, if you're elderly or disabled, maybe you're on a fixed income, you could apply for an exemption. So that's one other option. So where that money could go is, again, that CAP program that already exists. It works, could be expanded for, again, low-income and vulnerable communities to have money to do green infrastructure maintenance. It could go to community organizations. We floated that again with the city of New Orleans saying, oh, well, this could be a continual fund. For those who are paying attention to the artists, Mary Cantrell created like an artist fund, right? Where she did the fair share and she moved that money. And so now if you have a nonprofit or you have a culture bearer and you want to build something, do you have a fund for that? It would be similar to a fund for nonprofits to do that. And then obviously capital projects, expanding the city's ability to do more green infrastructure projects and less gray infrastructure projects. We are not looking to build more gray. We're hoping to, again, to change how we do the gray. This is the key.
That's still vague. If you ask the public, if the public asks you that question, all you've said specifically is parks. What other specific things would be built? It sounds like some of the money would go to give people discounts. Is that right?
No, I think it is. Well, let me back up, Jeff. I said a few different things, and I think you may be not hearing what I'm saying. So there's pocket parks. There's the community adaptation program, which is under NORA. Maybe Holly, you can drop the link on that. The other one, again, is green infrastructure maintenance, right? We already have green infrastructure across the city, but it's not being maintained. The other one, of course, is expanding the city's ability to expand green infrastructure projects across the board. And then also a fund for nonprofits to do more community and neighborhood scale projects. So the reason why, Jeff, though, we're building it right now. So I don't have a physical policy that I can hand you right at this moment. The workshop series is where everybody's talking together to build exactly what you're talking about, giving everybody the exact items we want that money to go to. So I don't have it yet, but hopefully in June, I can send that to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Jessica, can you answer Betty's question? Allow
Yes.
Betty.
Well, I need to jump in
Yeah.
before you even try to answer my question, because I'm not sure anyone on this call knows what's happening in the Leonidas Pensiontown neighborhood next to the Sewage and Water Board. More than 10 years ago, finally, one of the residents that lives on Spruce Street, which butts up to the Sewage and Water Board, came to those of us in the neighborhood organization and said, we need help. We are having oil spewed all over our cars, our property. We can't sit in our houses and watch TV or have a conversation because of the noise coming from the turbines. This is 2023, and the noise and the oil are happening daily. Sewage and Water Board is absolutely incapable of fixing this problem. They are now telling the neighbors last week that the problem is turbine 5. And they keep saying to us, do you want to have flooding or do you want to have oil and noise? We have finally started saying this is an equity issue. If it had not been for the poor people that are having their cars damaged and the noise pollution are paying sewage and water board fees. I can't tell you guys, we are so over it in this neighborhood. I love what you're saying. I love the idea. I cannot figure out though, how we are going to fix the problems that we have right now, because even with they're not guaranteeing us when the electrical plant is built that this turbine 5 won't have to be used. They're telling us GE can't figure out what the problem is. My question is, where are we going to come up with the money to fix that issue? Because I'm telling people can't sleep. Luckily, I'm deaf and I'm 12 blocks away, but friends of mine who live within 5 blocks, in fact, I just had a call the other day from a neighbor who said, we can't sleep anymore. And they are now obligated to send an email to the neighbors to let them know when the noise is going to start, but it's consistent. So I'm all for what you're doing. There is property, sewage and water board property that I am working with neighbors to try to get a park built on next to some Hano property. But my problem is where are we going to come up with the money to solve the problems that we have right now before we start building parks and giving people discounts? Because the people living around the sewage and water board plant, guys, they can't do this. This has been going on, we know it, more than 10 years when they finally told us about it. So very frustrating.
I can hear your frustration, Betty. And actually, I've had a lot of people come to me and ask me about what is going on in sewage and water board. Why is it happening? I can't hear myself think. For context, those who live in the Holly Grove, Leonidas, or Leandis, depending on how you say it, neighborhoods, or right next to the power plant, right? The main office for sewage and water board. I think it was a year ago, they cut a deal with Entergy to build a new substation plant. Historically, sewage and water board, again, I talked about energy and why it's so expensive. They run everything, the drainage, the water quality, the sewage treatment, they run that on oil and coal or gas, which is terrible. All of those are inefficient and expensive, but also, increase our carbon footprint. They are now they ran all their power in-house. So they're switching to a substation where basically all the power will be run through Entergy. And then in a case of an emergency, sewage and water board's backup power will do it. So they basically switch. So instead of them running their own power all day, they'll be running it through Entergy. That I will say, it's no guarantee that it's going to reduce the cost, although that is a claim from Gaston Corbin. We're watching to see if that works. Now, to answer your question, Betty, about the cost, right? So the city has already used some of the ARPA money that they got from Joe Biden to cover the cost, as well as a bond from the state. As some of you may have heard in the news, when Jeff Landry threatened to not give us our bond money because of abortion, that was what that money was for. So you may have been like, what is he threatening us for? That bond money was for that substation. So technically, Sewage and Water Board already has the money for this project. And Betty, I think me and Beth and Holly went to go view it, the system, and they said they'd be done by 2025, but we know this is New Orleans and we know how long things take. That could be 2026, 2030. Like, I'm not holding my breath that 2025 is gonna, I'd rather be surprised than, disappointed, let me put it that way. But that's where that cost is going to. Now, for the stormwater fee, the cost for the the revenue, not the cost, the revenue from the stormwater fee could go to capital project improvement. The key thing is here, we're not advocating for any particular agency to get any particular amount of money. I've talked to the city council about this, and they've given us a few suggestions that we'll take to the workshops, which is one being that to your point, Betty, about the accountability, right, and what's going on behind closed doors, creating a separate agency that holds these agencies accountable. That could mean a drainage consolidation as well, right? So most people, again, there's two agencies that manage drainage. They don't talk to each other, AKA DPW and Sewage and Water Board. If we consolidate them, we're already reducing our costs and our overhead. We're paying double the people to do the same job. The other thing I will say about the revenue is that a Sewage and Water Board, for example, could say, I need $20 million for a capital projects that needs to be, for this neighborhood. They would have to apply for that money and again, be accountable. The way the millages already work, they don't have to, there's no accountability currently built into the millages that already exist. So the 16.23 millages that everybody's paying for right now, Sewage and Water Board literally doesn't have to give you anything. In fact, it's so bad that I just read that JP Morrell last week is requiring Sewage and Water Board to do an audit or he's going to sue them. This is how bad it is. And that's because it's not built into the law. I'm asking, we're trying to create something that's built into the law. We can't do it from the back end and say, okay, well, here's a blank check. And then 5 years later say, well, you didn't do what I asked you to do. Well, we didn't build those accountability measures into that to begin with. So Sewage and Water Board does not have to be accountable to us. The other thing that's most important, Betty, is most people don't know the Sewage and Water Board is a state-run agency. They are not, they don't belong to us. They belong to the state of Louisiana. They don't have to be accountable to you and I. Now, they have JP Morrell and Stephanie Hilferty did try to change the law to make Sewage and Water Board accountable to the council only. That didn't get passed last year, but hopefully they'll bring it back up again this year or next year. This is a fiscal year for the legislature, so it'll probably have to be next year. But this is why, Betty, you're so frustrated, because neighbors can complain all day to Sewage and Water Board 24/7, and they can just say, thank you for your complaint. I don't have to listen to you. Because legally they have to listen to the state. But fun fact, the state does not have a water oversight agency. There is no one agency that's over utilities, right? There's a Public Service Commission that shares its job with Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality, which also shares its job with Natural Resource, which also shares its job with the Louisiana Department of Health, but no one is accountable, no one makes them accountable to residents. There is no law at the state level. So until we change how these systems work, we're going to have the same problems over and over again that Betty's facing. That was a long-winded answer, Betty, but it was a big question.
Valerie, I see that you're unmuted. Did you have a question, Valerie?
Yeah, well, I'm one of the Just Beyond Pillars, and I monitor the chat. And I just wanted to let Brooke and VP know that Holly answered your question in the chat, and tell Jessica your next one is Cheryl.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know, Betty, I don't know if you have any comment on that, but I just wanted to make sure you felt heard or answered.
No, my only comment is it's such a disaster, because when Landrieu was mayor, and I had a friend who's an attorney who was on the Sewage and Water Board. She was removed by Mayor Cantrell because she asked too many questions. And I'm not sure, I'm understanding from my friend who's no longer on the board that the board now is made up of people that are not ever going to ask the mayor. They're not going to question anything. So in this whole process, what do we do about the sewage? They took it away from part of the city council running it to having the mayor run it, and it's now as bad as it was before. So I think as our group, we're really going to have to start putting pressure on, number one, to get tax money from the nonprofits. We can no longer afford for 40% of the people in this city to be paying the cost of two-lane, everything, Loyola, churches, all of it, 60%. So thank you. I'm still frustrated, but you have been very helpful in your comments. And I'm going to encourage the neighbors I'm going to send them this video and see, working together, if we can't figure something out, because it's not working.
Absolutely. And I will say too that, the way it works for Sewage and Water Board, for those who are curious, is yes, the mayor decides who was on the board. She's the chair of the board. And I actually had an old board member of my organization apply to Sewage and Water Board just so I could see what the process is like, because it's not transparent. You go on the city's website and there's a little line that says you can apply to be a member of the Sewage and Water Board by sending an email to mayor@gov, blah, blah, blah. It took her over a year to get into the system. And literally the mayor had to look at her resume and her cover letter, and the mayor decided who is on the board. So again, we're talking about inequity. This is a big red flag. And again, that requires change at the state level for us to decide how that changes. Cheryl, good to hear. I think I know Cheryl. Hey, Cheryl. What happens when the millage fee expires in 2026? So there's two options, and I think this is something that we can doesn't have to just be decided right now, but I think should be discussed. The millages do expire, so we have 3 millages that on a rolling basis that expires. There's an option where residents don't have to pay the fee, where they only continue to pay the millage, and then nonprofits continue to pay or pay the stormwater fee. That's one option. Or the other option is we let the millages expire and then build that into the fee itself. I will say that Sewage and Water Board, as much as we're annoyed with them and aggravated with them, is actually really interested in not having anything to do with the money for drainage. At least that's what we were told, right? They think it's a good idea for someone else to manage it, and then they just do the actual implementation of the pumping stations. I think that there's an appetite to let the millages expire. The concern is that the city's really good credit rating is based on those millages. So if we want to keep our, it's like, you know, when you have a good credit score and then you close one of your credit card accounts, what happens? Your credit score drops. So the concern is that if we let the millages expire, then the city's credit rating could drop as well. So I think there's a lot of lawyers looking into it right now. Right now, I think there's a lot more research needs to happen, and the success of the stormwater fee will also determine if we let those expire. Or again, if we build it into the stormwater fee where it could replace that millage. So I think there's a few options on the table, Cheryl, but I think I'm glad you brought it up because it's a very important question that we're going to have to keep looking into. But luckily, the stormwater fee can hopefully be a stopgate from us losing our good credit rating, because that would be the worst case scenario. We don't want to lose our good credit rating. Any other questions? Or jump in, or feelings or thoughts?
Hey, this is Reverend Manning. I was just curious. So we have 20 years, as you said in the very beginning, Jessica, and as we look at this and the state that we're in, which is a critical crisis state of affairs, even more than I think people realize. And when we say 20 years, it really is more like 10 years, because we are just in that place of crisis. What's the stat that that we're losing a football field worth of land every hour or something like that, or is it every minute? What is it? Something just mind-blowing like that. And so this, putting this in place is good for now, but we're on a downward spiral that we're almost like an avalanche. So I just want to make clear that the work that you're doing right now is going to be consistent. Like, you're not going to go away. I mean, the work of doing these workshops and all of this is going to be continually just morphing throughout this process and changing according to what how our situation deteriorates really in the next decade.
Right.
And we'll continually keep an eye on this, that the fee may have to become more, or it's just going to be very just dynamic and organic as it continues, right?
Absolutely, it has to be dynamic. And I think this is, again, the difference again with a millage, right? A millage can't change. It's 10 years, same rate, same outcome. It's creating a stormwater utility and creating a stormwater fee says we can look at the revenue generation and we can look at the challenges the city has every year and adjust that need. This is, again, why we're not doing a millage. The other thing I want to say, Reverend Manning, is we're actually losing more than a football field today. I recently read that we're now losing about a football field every hour now. I just came from a meeting with the Environmental Defense Fund, and people out in Homa, people out in Plaquemines Parish says they will fish in one spot and they'll come back the next day and the spot is gone. We are in a massive massive crisis. And I know it doesn't feel that way in New Orleans because we have a levee system and it feels like, oh, that's out there. We are in a massive crisis. And as I mentioned, I sit on the CPRA advisory board. I just came from their meeting right before the legislative session. They will be out of money. They're going to hit the fiscal cliff in 2032. So yes, 2032. That's when they're going to hit the fiscal cliff, which means all that money they got from the BP Horizon oil spill, which is about $50 billion, will be out. There will be no more left. And the state currently doesn't have any revenue generation for coastal restoration outside of a few federal programs. Why does that matter? That means that if we, again, as a parish, don't figure out a way to pay for what we need for ourselves, the state will not be able to support us. And I really want to reiterate, I find it very scary, and I think everybody should look into recently a Joe Biden released an economic report based on climate change. They are trying to move people out of coastal communities. They don't want to pay for climate change. They do not want to pay for FEMA. They do not want to pay the National Flood Insurance Program. And when you see the FEMA flood risk 2.0 and your flood insurance rates skyrocketed, that is intentional because they don't want to cover the cost. So it's really important to understand that if New Orleans wants to be here, we want to keep enjoying Jazz Fest and keep enjoying Mardi Gras. In a way, it's unfortunate we're pushed back into this inequitable system where we have to take care of ourselves and create a system that is based in equity because, again, the federal system is inequitable and we're running out of time. 2032 is when the state hits the fiscal cliff, and 2040 is when it is predicted that Southeast Louisiana will be unlivable without massive change. 2040. That's not that far away from here. So that's a really good point, Reverend Manning, and why we're doing this work now. We don't have time to waste.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I saw Jeff on mute earlier.
I have the question. What is your power analysis in your collaborative of who will carry or who has the potential to carry the most weight in decision making?
That's a good question. I will be honest with you and say it's probably the city council, right? So this is, as they say, a blessing and a curse, right? That we can go straight to the council and say, this is exactly what we want, and this is exactly what we want to see. Historically, though, as those who've been in council chambers and have advocated for policy knows that doesn't always work that way. And the council has the ability to say, actually, I don't want to do that because I heard from 2 constituents in my district who don't want to do this, or I heard from 10 constituents in this neighborhood and they don't want to do that. So I'm concerned about the ability of city council to hold to the community's desires and needs and really listen to us, which they're not very good at historically. The other power players to be concerned of and leery of is one, the Catholic Church. Historically, and I'm raised Catholic, so let me, just put that up there. But historically, if you look at other stormwater fees, the Catholic Church has been the biggest antithesis, or they don't want to see this happen because, again, they have a lot of properties, they have lots of churches, they have lots of schools, they have lots of systems that are impervious. So that's been a problem in other cities across the board. Every time I say, well, who's been the one group that's been against this? It's been constantly the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church. The last thing I'll say is the state. And I think we've already talked about how the state is not keeping Sewage and Water Board accountable. They also don't keep themselves accountable, right? So most people don't realize that the convention center, the Superdome, the Port of New Orleans, they're actually owned by the state. They are managed by the state. All of those entities, all the profits go back up to the state. So when we're doing this fee, I'm concerned about the state pushing back against it because they really don't want to be accountable to New Orleans residents, and they have historically not had to be. So that's a good question, Jeff, and I hope that's helpful.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. Let's see here. I saw your question. Let me see. Brooke, I know we have a few minutes left, so I'm gonna try to get through this. We are, is the council better? I don't know. I think that we have people on the council that care. I don't know if better is the right word, because when I speak to them about this work in particular, almost all of them are clueless. there's only 2 council members, and Holly was in a lot of my meetings with the council members, that I really feel like they have, well, I'd say 3 that have a good grasp, right? And I'll be transparent about it. Joe Giarrusso really understands the system. Joe knows, okay, this is how the levers work. This is where the money's going. This is where the money's not going. Also, I'd say Oliver Thomas, because he sits on the infrastructure board as the chair, not the board, the committee as the chair. He, because of his history with the city, he knows all the ins and outs, where as he say, where the bones are buried. He knows all of that information. But beyond that, there's really not, Helena Moreno's office is not really strong in this area. They focus on energy, not water. Freddie King is brand new. He's learning. Eugene's brand new. He's learning. Leslie's learning. So they don't really have a lot to say on water, although they are interested. JP Morrell has historically hated Sewage and Water Board, right? And so in a way, he's an advocate, right? Because he wants to see change, but he doesn't necessarily have an aim for that change. It's kind of like shooting in the dark, and he's hoping something will stick. So if I have trust in 2 council members, it would be definitely Joe and Oliver, who have been big cheerleaders of what we're doing and are really excited for this process. That's a good question.
And yeah, that's a good question. And I wonder if we could help build the support of the council members for those that you don't feel that are got your back as much as they should. How can Justice and Beyond and those listening help to make them allies?
Yeah. Thank you, Reverend. Yeah, that's a huge thing. And if you can talk, when you talk to your council member, when you see them and you say, hey, I heard the water collaborative, I'm interested in this, and I think you should too, please let them know, because that's the one thing that they said would be the lever for making this change. They said, none of them said that they were against it. So let me be clear. None of them, well, I take that back. One has. But every single, in which I could be transparent, Helena Moreno's office said that they're not interested. But it's because they had a negative experience. I think, I forgot who it was that was talking about what happened in 2017, the flood that happened under Mitch, that Helena Moreno's office tried to do a stormwater fee as well, but it wasn't equitable. It was top down, and it had a lot of pushback from Mitch and a lot of pushback from other people at the city. So I think more so Helena Moreno's office is a little scarred from a bad interaction with the Mitch Landrieu administration. But the rest of the council members have been really open-minded. They've been listening. They're really interested, and they want a solution. Every single council member says, I don't know how to fix Sewage and Water Board. Can you help me try to fix Sewage and Water Board? So as you know, there's like 3 groups trying to fix it, and I don't think they've made much progress yet because it's a systems problem, right? That's the key there. I see the chat is moving and grooving. So I know I won't be able to get to all the questions.
Yeah, we got about 2 minutes, so maybe 2 more questions.
Yeah, so I see Lane asking as important as this. I'm just reading it out loud. I don't think there be public appetite for stormwater drainage fee. I will say, Lane, I've gone to multiple communities and everybody's excited about it. And let me tell you why. Because everybody is sick of what we have now, right? Doing the same thing over and over again. We've been doing the same thing and it's not working, right? I went to the French Quarter Neighborhood Association. I thought that they would be the first ones to hate this idea because they're so outspoken. They were ecstatic. They were like, finally, something different, something that's not the status quo. I went to Lakeview, again, community that's usually very opposed to the same thing. Oh, something different, something that's trying to get us to accountability, something that's trying to get to equity. So I think people are weary of fees and taxes, as they should be in today's day and age, right? With the economy the way it is. I'm not saying we shouldn't be, but I often hear people say, I'm not against taxes. Most people, right? Not everybody. I'm not against taxes if I know where it's going, right? I lived in New York City. They have some of the highest taxes in the country, but I saw where my taxes went. The streets were cleaned every other day. Every street light is working. They have public transportation. So in New York, this is a very different city, right? But I'm saying in my personal experience, people don't mind paying if they know where it's going. The problem in New Orleans and in Louisiana is that we never built transparency into our systems. We just, Huey P. Long wasn't about transparency. So here we are in 2023, we need to make that happen. So I just will say that, Lane, people have actually been quite excited. And the people who aren't necessarily excited about it, but maybe curious, have said, as long as the fee is not too expensive, as long as it doesn't break the bank, I'm open to it. And so I think as we build the policy, we start really putting that out in June, I think we're going to see a lot more feedback. Of course, people will be against it because that's natural, but I think that's also part of the process. I know it's 6:28, Reverend Manning, so I feel like I answered most of those questions.
You did. Thank you, Jessica. You did a terrific job. So final question is, give us some concrete ways in which we can assist your efforts, or the efforts that's going to help us all. So how can we get involved?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing Holly put in the chat, please join us on a workshop. Sage, I think he was on the call. Sage has been in most of the workshops. We have had a few people from Waterwise also on the workshop. But if you're interested, please send Holly or Beth an email and we can get you into them. The second way is if you belong to a neighborhood association, like I said, over the summer, we're going to be doing workshops and town halls in communities or businesses. So if you are part of one, whatever neighborhood you live in, send us an email and we'll try to get one set up with you in the summer or fall. Because again, the goal is for us to go to every neighborhood and talk about this. So that's another way. And the last way is talk to your neighbors about what I talked about. Most people don't talk about drainage. You see your water bill, you get mad, you pay it, and then you forget about it. This is an ongoing conversation that needs to happen. And again, it's about changing the way we've been doing it. What we've been doing needs to be scratched. It's not going to get us to equity. It's not going to get us to justice. It is definitely not going to change without us putting a little extra oomph into how we're talking about this. So please talk to your neighbors about it. Let this be your dinner time conversation maybe. And send us an email if you have any other questions or concerns.
Thank you, Jessica. And just to put it out there, I am the pastor of Broadmoor Community Church, where no perfect people are allowed, located according to South Broad Napoleon and South and Fontainebleau. We're on South Dupree, but we are at the bottom of the bowl, and it always floods here in Broadmoor. So I say that to say I would welcome having a town hall, hosting one here in our sanctuary at any time to get the residents of Broadmoor more informed about what's happening and how it's going to affect them, because I'm sure El Pavo Royale, right next to Broadmoor Community Church, that gets flooded out every time it has a major rain, and it's spoken about having to move, but you know we love them here. So yeah.
We'll definitely put your name down, Reverend Manning, and we'll try to reach out to you in the coming weeks, and we'd love to do that. Absolutely.
All right. Very good. We'd love to host you. All right. Any closing words from you all? Any closing remarks, Jessica, Holly?
No, just thank you for having us. And it's an ongoing conversation. Like I said, we'd love to be back if it's needed. And hopefully we'll bump into you guys in the streets when we're out there canvassing.
Great. And those workshops that are on waiting lists, if somebody puts their name on the waiting list, is it is it just unthinkable that they're going to make it through and all of that to get down to being able to attend, or are they just waiting lists so long?
No, Beth, jump in. Go ahead.
Right, Reverend Manning. Actually, we've been going into the waiting list, I would say probably a third of the time. And so we definitely do reach out. We want the room full, and we want as diverse amount of participants as possible. So whenever there is an opening, we were kind of shocked it filled up so fast. And a lot of people are coming back every single week, so that's what is making it tough for us to include a whole lot of different people, but we certainly are, whenever possible, going on to that waiting list.
All right, good. Make sure y'all don't get discouraged about seeing the waiting list. Know that they are filtering through those folks and getting people into that room. So great, thank you for that. I went to one of the salons. It was very, very informative, and I appreciated being there.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. I didn't know you went to one. Yeah, so that it means it's working.
Beth, what time are they scheduled for? Pretty much the same time?
Yes, I put the workshop website in the chat.
Okay.
So you can find it there. It is waterjusticeneworleans.org. And that has all of the dates, times, locations. We also are providing childcare for people who need it. And just recently, we created a map for parking and public transportation.
Thank you.
Also, you get a $50 gift card for attending, so that's a good incentive, because we are getting your feedback. And then you get food, we feed you too. So, and we've heard, we have a
It's
black
good
owned,
food.
yeah, a black owned company called Next to Eat. So we make sure everybody who comes, if you're coming after work, you're coming with your child or your family members, that you're comfortable and they're comfortable. So, but yeah, we do have space most of the time. So please put your name in a hat and let us know.
Thank y'all for making it, incentivizing people to be there, making it comfortable, and thinking of all the reasons why people have barriers to getting there, because it's so important that people participate in this process. I also appreciate y'all just putting it out there that the reason why we're seeing inequity in our system right now is due to systemic racism, and we got to call it what it is. So thank you for being clear about that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you to you, Jessica, and to you, Beth, for your entire team for all the work you're doing, for coming here tonight and taking time, and just for really making sure that the people are educated about this, and just doing your due diligence. We need that. The people don't need to be kept on the process. We need to be engaged and involved and doing, as you said, to make sure we take care of ourselves instead of waiting for the federal government to do it for us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Right. You're welcome. All right, everybody, we're going to close with some announcements. I know a few people are going offline, but if you have any announcements at this time of events that are coming up that we need to be aware of, please let us know at this time. Any announcements?
Yes, Pastor, I had one, the big green easy. This is a public workshop, virtual workshop. Also, this is talking about the New Orleans parks. I will send it to Brooke, for Brooke can add it to our Facebook page and our email address. So they starting, the meetings will start on May the 8th. Then we'll continue on to May the 11th. So dates and time will be posted on our Facebook page and our email.
All right. Thank you, Valerie. Appreciate that. Any other announcements, anybody?
Reverend Manning, this is Liz.
Go ahead, Liz.
I just wanted to ask everybody if you could, SB 35, which is the air monitoring bill that you actually testified in favor of last week. And it got through one committee, and it's going through the finance committee this week. If everybody could contact their state senator and ask them to support the air monitoring bill, SB 35. Thanks a lot.
Very important. Thank you, Liz, for putting that out there. Monitoring bill is calling for 24/7 monitoring put in place at the over 451 petrochemical and oil refinery plants, so the people in the river parishes especially can be notified when emissions are at a high or when there is a impending emergency that they need to be aware of because of those emissions. So very, very critical. The people have the right to know what's going on in those industries. Thank you for that, Liz. Anybody else? Any other announcements? All right, hearing none, we're going to close in prayer and then go our way as we go with God and in peace. Jeff Connor, would you close us in prayer, please? Pastor Jeff.
All right.
Thank you.
God, we thank you that you have given us this beautiful earth that is stunning in its beauty and its complexity, and that you have asked us to take care of it. And we thank you for these who have presented tonight, that they are so diligent and learning all that needs to be learned and working in the ways that they are working with all of New Orleans. And so we ask, oh God, that you would bless their efforts and our efforts with them to create a more equitable and sustainable earth, so that we might gift you back the earth that you gave us by taking care of it. And we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend Connor. Appreciate that. God bless you all. Thank you for showing up tonight. Continue to show up, not only in this forum, but in all instances where we see inequity and systemic racism. We'll see you back here next week. Be kind, compassionate, empathetic, and loving to all people so that we can change the world. God bless you. We'll see you next Monday.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Good night.